Hello and welcome to the Fireplace podcast. This is episode 16. This is Mike and myself. We are tackling taking an income from a SIPP. This follows on from previously we did an episode about how pensions work, and we're very aware that there's a lot of people on the track that have already got a pension, they've already got a SIPP, and the big question is, how does this work at the end when I want to get the money out of it?
Yes. Hi, Andy. We thought we wanted to talk about pensions, and to make life a little bit easier, we're going to concentrate on a SIPP. Now, a SIPP is a type of defined contribution pension. A lot of people we know in the group have SIPPs. Some of you may also have occupational pensions, and if your occupational pension is a defined contribution pension, it will likely work in a very similar way to a SIPP. What we're not going to talk about today is defined benefit pensions, which are very different, and we'll be covering those in at least one, if not more, future episodes.
So for today's purposes, I'm going to play the idiot here because that fits very well. Anybody that's listened regularly will know that my bête noire is I cannot get my head around pension withdrawal stuff, all the crazy acronyms. It's a confusing setup. The platforms don't help. They often try and re-explain it in better terms and come up with their own silly labels, not looking at you, Vanguard, but Vanguard. So Mike's going to be the grown-up here. I'm going to be posing the questions. This actually reflects my situation pretty closely because a couple of months ago I reached pension access age. So I've not done anything yet with my SIPP. And so I'm actually at that point of figuring out, well, what are my options? How could I withdraw from this? So for today's purposes, we'll use a fictionalized version of that. So we're going to say I've got a SIPP with a value of £200,000. Now, sorry, Mike, go on.
I was just going to say that I'm a little bit older than Andy, and I've been through this quite recently on two different platforms. So it's still relatively fresh with me, but it still took me a good few goes running through it before I got it clear in my head. And some parts of it are still not crystal clear to me.
Yeah, they don't make it easy, do they?
No.
So I've lost my flow. I was going to say
something
else on that one.
You're our guinea pig, and
I'm the guinea pig. We're going to call it 200,000 that's in there. That's not my actual amount because we don't like talking in people's real numbers. But we figured, well, that's a nice round number because then we can work with that. And because as we all know, hopefully, we're allowed a quarter of this as a tax-free withdrawal, so I'm equating that to 50 grand, and then there's 150 grand that's taxable as if it were income, and so that's may get hit with income tax when it's taken out, we may find, or I might be able to use my personal allowance and have it drip fed over the years tax-free.
Yeah. So I think what we're assuming here is that Andy's a little bit younger, and he's got this £200,000 SIPP. And shortly before his 55th or 57th birthday, he gets an email from the SIPP platform saying, "Dear customer, you're soon to reach your 57th birthday and you'll soon have access to your SIPP. And just to let you know, here's a whole load of stuff to read. And when it's your birthday, do contact us to get your hands on some of that money."
Okay, so the first thing is I know I'm allowed tax-free cash out of this. So for the first withdrawal I'm interested in making, how could I withdraw 20 grand to which I would then use to fill up this year's ISA allowance? Can I do that? What happens to the rest of my pot when that happens? I should say that's the thing I was going to say. We're talking about withdrawing cash here, but I know it is more complicated because these things are invested in assets. And so there's going to be an intermediate step somewhere where you're selling assets to cash in order to make sure there's enough cash there to pay out, aren't you, Mike? Is that right?
Exactly, yes. So we thought that to make life a little bit easier, we'll assume that you've got only cash in your SIPP for the time being. And then later on in the podcast, we'll talk about how you actually convert your assets into cash. But for the mechanics of taking money out of the SIPP, we'll concentrate on cash for the moment.
Because as before, we will, as during the accumulation phase, we're going to want to leave this invested and growing, aren't we, as long as possible?
That's right.
It's going to take a little bit of management, I guess. So,
Yes.
I tell them, yes, I'd like 20 grand's worth of tax-free cash. That's leaving 180 grand in there. What happens to all of that in terms of taxable crystallization, all of that gubbins?
Yes. So what you do is you say to your platform, I'd like to get my hands on £20,000 of my tax-free cash. And they will go through probably a questionnaire with you at the very least. And depending on the platform, that could be quite onerous. It might even be a telephone call, or it might just be a couple of pages where you have to kind of fill in a few tick boxes and submit an electronic form. But pretty much they shouldn't put too many roadblocks in your way, and you should be able to get your hands on that cash pretty soon. And what happens is, because you've taken some tax-free cash, that means that some of your pension is now taxable. So the way it works is kind of in reverse. When you take the tax-free cash, another chunk of money, which is 3 times the size of the tax-free cash, gets put into a separate pot within the SIPP where it's then taxable. So when you start the SIPP, everything's in one big pot, and depending on what the platform call it, it's all mixed up together. But as soon as you touch
this is what we jokingly called Schrodinger's pension. Then this is a fog of probabilities. Will that money be taxed or not? There's tax-free mixing in with taxable.
Yes, it's all one big pot within the SIPP, and it'll just be one big account, and you'll see it all together. But as soon as you touch that and you take out some tax-free cash, then things change a little bit. Now, that's where what we call crystallization happens.
Yeah.
And when you take out your £20,000, the SIPP provider says, here's your £20,000. And by the way, because that's 25% tax-free, we've put £60,000 into a new part of your pension called the taxable pot.
Okay, so they're applying a marker to my SIPP and saying this is whatever 40% crystallized in this scenario. But in practice, that means that there's money in this drawdown pot that's going to be treated as taxable for income purposes. That's had its tax-free portion taken out. We've separated out the blend. Okay.
Yeah, so the way to think about it is if you add up the £20,000 you've taken out and the £60,000 that's now been put in this separate pot, you get to your 80,000, and that's your 25% tax-free.
Yeah, got it. So the next step is having used that bit of tax-free cash to fill my ISA. The next thing I want to do is set up some regular income from this pension. I'd like to be drawing £1,000 a month out. So yes. Am I right in thinking that's FAD? That's FAD or flexi-access drawdown, and that comes from that £60,000 which has been juiced of its tax-free element, and it just I could set up. Hey, interactive investor, I want you to pay away £1,000 a month to my bank account from that pot. And then the only responsibility on me is to make sure I keep that pot topped up in future years to support that.
Yes. Yeah, so what we're talking about here is flexi-access drawdown, FAD, which is the two-stage process where you first take out a tax-free chunk, and then later, and you can leave it as long as you like, you then decide and you tell your platform, having taken the tax-free lump sum, I'd now like some of the taxable money, please. And you can take it out once or regularly or whatever. But in your case, you'd say to them, I'd like an amount, I think you said £1,000 each month out of that £60,000 taxable pot. Now, the point here is, I'm using the word taxable very carefully.
It's potentially taxable. It's treated as income for income tax purposes. That was the reason I've said I'd like £1,000 a month, because I'm thinking that gives me £12,000 a year. It should stay within my personal allowance, the 12,570. So I should actually get this without really paying any tax.
As long as you haven't got any other income. Yes.
Yeah.
So the income from a pension is treated exactly the same as it would be from a job. So if that £1,000 a month you've got coming in from the taxable part of your pension is your only income, you won't be paying any tax. But if you've got other income, obviously it contributes towards your total.
The other thing I wanted to ask on this, as soon as I set up those £1,000 a month withdrawals, is that what triggers the money purchase annual allowance? Because I know that as soon as I withdraw some taxable cash, that triggers the MPAA. And for listeners that don't know, I know it's just another acronym. That limits me in future that suddenly if I'm earning a load, I'm then forever limited that I can only contribute a maximum of £10,000 a year to pensions again.
Exactly. Once you take some taxable money out of your pension, it then limits how much you can put into the pension if you decide to go back to work.
So it isn't that doesn't happen at the point that this drawdown pot gets created because I've taken the tax-free cash. I'm allowed to do that without triggering the allowance. So it's got to be when I say I'd like some of this taxable cash out of that pot, please.
Yes.
Right.
So you've got your £20,000 tax-free lump sum, which you've hopefully sensibly put in your ISA for the year.
Yeah.
And you've got £1,000 coming into your bank, just like a salary, out of the taxable portion of your SIPP. And hopefully with £60,000 in your taxable SIPP, you can carry on taking out those £1,000 a month for quite a long time before it runs out.
Okay. And so when I come to need to top up that drawdown pot, I'm obliged to take some tax-free cash at the same time, aren't I?
Yes, the only way you can get money into that drawdown taxable pot is by taking the tax-free lump sum. So you can't just go to your SIPP provider on your 57th or 58th birthday and say, I'd like £1,000 a month, please, from the drawdown pot, because they'll say you haven't got a drawdown pot. You only create the drawdown pot by taking out a tax-free lump sum. Now you might take out quite a small tax-free lump sum. You might take out, £3,000, and then that would create a drawdown pot of £9,000. But if you're taking £1,000 a month, that's not going to last very long.
Yeah, right. So that's described one of the two drawdown methods. The other one is the lovely acronym UFPLS.
Yes. So we've done the complicated one, and this is the more simple one.
Okay.
So as we said last time, the more you look into flexi-access drawdown and UFPLS or uncrystallised funds, pension lump sums, the more you realise they're actually very similar. So if you didn't want to have a regular income and you just said, right, I've retired, I'd like £15,000, that'll do me for the whole of the year, and I just want it all now, and I don't want to touch the pension ever again, you can go to the pension provider and say, I'd like £15,000 as an UFPLS transaction, and the difference is you get the tax-free bit and you get the taxable bit all at once.
So it's a blended withdrawal, basically.
Yes. So I think 15,000 is probably a bad example. Actually,
if we say 16,000, then that's 12,000 of tax-free and 4,000 of taxable. No, hang on, the other way around, isn't it? 12,000 of taxable.
Yes. So
4,000 of tax-free.
So you ask them for 16. So you ask your SIPP provider and say, I don't want to do the drawdown thing. I'm just going to have a big lump sum, and I'd like £16,000, but I'm going to be using UFPLS. So I want some of that £16,000 to be tax-free, 25% of it, and I'd like the other 75% of it to be taxable. So what the pension company does is it says, right, hang on a minute, £16,000. If we divide that by 4, he gets £4,000 tax-free, and he gets another amount 3 times that. The other £12,000 is taxable. So you get the full £12,000, and the pension company says to the Inland Revenue, by the way, this Andy bloke, we've just given him £9,000 of taxable income for this year, which should mean that you don't pay any income tax. But if it comes to your tax return and you earn £5,000 doing a side hustle, then the Inland Revenue will say, hang on a minute, you need to pay us some tax.
Yeah, very good. So we're doing the UFPLS as a one-off lump sum withdrawal, and that's because the platforms that we're all using only offer that. That in theory they could be offering a monthly version of that, a blended withdrawal, but
Yes,
they don't do.
there are some platforms out there which offer monthly versions of UF Plus, and there are some where you can even split the amounts and split the proportions and maybe take a larger tax-free element and a smaller withdrawal. But most of the retail platforms don't offer that.
Right.
That's
So
something
this is in the realms of these nasty guys with high fees like SJP.
Yes, it's also in the realms of occupational pensions, which might
Okay.
have no fees at all, but might actually be
Okay.
more flexible.
So somebody's workplace pension might have a different range of options here.
Yes, I know some that do. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So that's all pretty clear. The final thing I wanted to ask is, I know that I can use my taxable portion of my pension to buy an annuity if I wanted, if the rates happen to be good. So how does that work? Is that the same that I've got to do this put money into a drawdown pot and that's got to be used to purchase the annuity?
Yes, so most annuities would be bought from the money in your drawdown pot because that's the most efficient way of doing it because you've effectively that's taxable money and the annuity is quite tax efficient. But obviously you'd need to have made a tax-free lump sum at some point to have that money in the drawdown pot as well. I think in the olden days, that was the only option. There are annuities that you can get now from other money outside of the pension as well.
Yes.
And you could theoretically take a tax-free lump sum and use some of that for an annuity, but they're slightly different annuities.
Well, that's it. If I wanted to use all of this to buy an annuity, the general market for annuities is from the taxable 75% of this pension. So that comes from that drawdown pot in our parlance. If I wanted to use my my tax-free withdrawals, I can draw that and buy one. I can draw it. If I've previously put it in my ISA, I can use any tax-paid money to go and buy one of these, and those are called a purchased life annuity.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, they're pretty rare, and it seems like the whole pension industry is geared up to give you an example of, well, obviously on day one, we know we're telling everybody you're insufficient in your pensions, but on day one, let's assume you take a quarter of your pension and go buy a motorhome, which seems a bit crazy, and they only ever offer you, well, 3/4 of your pot can buy you a regular income for life.
Yes. Yes. I mean the Lamborghini phenomenon is the sort of tabloid example. When they introduced pension freedom reforms, there was a bit of an outcry because some people were literally cashing in 25% of their pension and going off to buy a Lamborghini. And that flexibility gives you lots of options. And if you use your ISA, for example, it can be very efficient and keep you invested. But obviously, you have to be careful to know what you're doing.
Yeah, I suppose the taxable nature of the rest of it is a good restraint on people that they will just draw it slowly so that they eke it out over a lifetime.
Yes. And then obviously, eventually, depending on when you retire, you're going to get to a point where you might be receiving a state pension. And then that's where tax comes in because that state pension, at least at the moment, is going to use up most, if not all, of your personal allowance. So that any withdrawals from the taxable part of your pension, then you start paying income tax on, which looks slightly less attractive, but there's not much you can do about it.
Well, for our purposes, it means that the best thing you can do is retire early and start using your allowance in those years before your state pension sweeps in and uses it all up to be tax efficient.
Yes, so there's a good case, there's a good principle there, which is if you've got a SIPP or a DC pension, you should always try and use your personal allowance if there's any left from the taxable part of the pension while you can, exactly. Because if you don't use it, you've lost it forever.
So in terms of drawdown from a FAD pot, I know that you've gone to Vanguard for this because of the functionality, because they will make it a one-step thing that you don't have to sell to cash with them. Is that right? That you can,
That's right.
they will automatically sell whatever assets are needed from your
Yeah, but
funds.
this may not be completely up to date, but when I last looked, most of the pension platforms use the same backend software by Origo, and Vanguard, according to someone in our group, designed and paid for their own add-on, which allows them to offer fully automated drawdown from pensions and also from ISAs. So with most platforms, as I understand it, they will pay you a regular income each month from your drawdown pot within your pension, but only if you've got enough cash in the cash portion of that pot. So what you have to do is make sure each month or each year that you've sold some stuff so there's enough cash in that cash portion. Now, if you're doing it annually, it's not a big deal. If you're doing it monthly, you often get a free transaction with some platforms, but you still need to set a reminder so there's always enough cash left to do that transfer. The advantage with Vanguard, and there may be other platforms as well, is that you can tell them to do that, but you can tell them which assets you want to sell and the proportions, and they'll do it all for you automatically.
Okay.
So far we've been going through this assuming that everything's cash, but in the real world, people are likely to have a number of shares or funds in their pension. And the advantage with Vanguard is they will each month, something like 10 days before the date on which they pay you the money, they will put an instruction in to sell those assets in those proportions. They'll wait for the money to go to cash. The cash will go into your cash account. And the reason it's 10 days because it gives them plenty of time to make sure the cash is always there in time for the payment date, and then they pay you. And if you do that in both your pension and your ISA, you can obviously stay invested pretty much all the time.
So in my case, I'm with Interactive Investor and likely to stay with them. So it's more of a manual process. I'm going to have to sell some shares in order for there to be cash there ready for the payout. It occurs to me, I wonder whether I could make my life easier with that and instruct them, please, could you send me my payments quarterly? And then that just gives me 4 reminders a year. I'm in a better position to make sure that the assets are there and not get in a muddle.
Yes, I mean, there are some things you can do. So this is sounding a bit old-fashioned, but if you've got assets that pay dividends, you can turn the dividends, you can pay the dividends out as cash, and then that will start trickling money into your cash account. And if you've got a regular quarterly or monthly, it'll scoop up all that dividend cash along with anything else you've got in there.
Now, I know that with an ISA, II will let you pay away dividends, and that would happen straight away to your bank.
Ooh.
Now, I'm wondering how that would work with the SIPP, because that would then be a drawdown event, wouldn't it?
It'll be a drawdown event, yes. If the assets were in the drawdown pot within your SIPP, that would be a trigger an income taxable event, and I'm guessing that'd be quite complicated for them to report to HMRC.
Yeah, interesting, and probably complicated for us to track and keep under the personal allowance wire. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're probably ranging beyond the scope of what we intended to do today with this. Now we're looking at the fine details, aren't we?
Going back to your example, so in the first month, you've taken out your £20,000 and put it in your ISA. You've got £1,000 coming in from the £60,000 pot in your taxable part of your pension, and you've got £120,000 left in the original pot of your pension. So that should keep you going for quite a long time, because you can take some money out of the ISA, You can got your £1,000 a month coming in. The drawdown pot's not going to run out too quickly, but that should keep going for quite a long time. But if something did happen, and say, I don't know, the market went down by half and you ended up with £30,000 in your drawdown pot and it ran out in 5 years, you would then just do the whole thing again. You take out another tax-free chunk, you take out another 20,000, and then another 60,000 moves into the drawdown pot, and your drawdown pot's got 60. But obviously, in the meantime, that 60,000 original pounds might have gone up, might have gone down. If you're only taking out £1,000 a month, that's it's £12,000 out of a 60. That's 20%. But it might still recover some years and bounce back, and obviously be up and down.
And the other thing that I'm wondering about is what happens with tax on these initial withdrawal from this FAB pot, the drawdown pot, because there's this problem, this little pitfall we call first month tax. So the first time you withdraw from your taxable pension, the taxman looks at this and says, "Oh, let's assume that that's the first monthly withdrawal of 12 in the year," and taxes you accordingly.
Yes, so that can hit people if you decide to take a larger amount than your personal allowance would be over the year.
So if I do have it set to £1,000 a month, the taxman's going to say, okay, well that equates to 12,000 a year. He's okay, and they're not going to take any tax off me.
Correct. Yes.
So that hopefully ticks that box. Is the alternative? I've heard people talk about doing a small UFPLS to get things going initially, to get this out of the way.
If you're going to be using UFPLS and taking chunks out, it's obviously more difficult for the Inland Revenue to work out what's going on, and they tend to assume a worst case scenario, and whatever amount you take out, they assume you'll be taking that out every month for the rest of the year. So if you take out a big chunk through UFPLS, they may well assume that you're going to be doing that for the whole of the year and sting you for tax. There is a form you can get it back, and they are, depending on who you get and how lucky you are, they can be reasonably quick at paying that tax back if you do it quickly enough and it's not too close to the end of the year. But I think that kind of covers most of it for now. I think, as we were saying, in future episodes, we'll be talking more about defined benefit pensions. And obviously life gets a bit more complicated if you've got more than one pension. But I think today we just want to concentrate on the straightforward end of it, which is taking money out of a SIPP.
I think we've done that admirably. I'm very pleased with that. That feels like it's explained it in a way that I could understand. And so if I can understand it, anybody can.
And I think the only thing I would add to that is if you've got quite a large SIPP, then there's a limit on the tax-free money you can take out as well.
Oh, the lifetime allowance.
No, the lump sum allowance, as it now is.
Yeah.
So the lump sum allowance limits how much tax-free cash you can get. So even if you've got a SIPP of £2 million, where you think you can take out £500,000 tax-free, the limit is still £268,000. So it's only really relevant for those with pots of a bit more than £1 million. But that makes it, and once you hit that limit, then it doesn't matter how much you've taken out. Everything from that point on is then taxable.
Very good. Right, I'm happy we've covered everything.
I think that's about it. Yep, that's good for now, I think.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Talk to you soon.
See you next time.
See you then. Bye-bye.